4 words on a folded piece of paper. "I've already checked out." That's what Shin Hyunwoo found on his kitchen table, beside his wife's wedding ring and a letter from a Jeju city law firm confirming that divorce proceedings had been filed. Not the night she discovered him. Not in anger. The morning after. Cold. Clear. Decided. But to understand those 4 words, you have to go back to the Tuesday she smiled at his mistress and said absolutely nothing. Zara Kwon is Nigerian-Igbo, head concierge of the residence Jeju, the most decorated boutique luxury hotel in Korea 2 years running. She built that reputation with her hands. For years. 42 suites. Every guest's name, every preference, every detail memorized and managed. She is, professionally, a woman who sees everything before anyone else does. So when her husband of 4 years started leaving rooms to take phone calls, when his phone went from kitchen counter to always face down, she noticed. She noticed for 6 months. Then she stopped making excuses. Then she spent 3 months preparing in silence. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry at him. She found a lawyer. She documented everything. She got ready. And then, on a Tuesday in November, Shin Hyunwoo booked Suite 7 of her hotel under a false name with 2 guests, champagne on arrival, and a late checkout, and asked for the most senior staff member to handle check-in. The most senior staff member was his wife. She walked across that lobby. She smiled the smile she gave every guest. She confirmed the suite details, the spa hours, the private beach access, the dietary preferences. One standard, one pescatarian, with the same warm, practiced grace she brought to every arriving guest. She handed them 2 key cards in the branded envelope. She said, "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Shin." Not Hyunwoo. Mr. Shin. The name she used for strangers. That was the sentence. Not a fight. Not tears. Not a confrontation in her own lobby. Just his surname, formal, professional, absolute, delivered with a smile that told him everything while giving the watching staff nothing to report. He was nobody special here. He was a guest, like any other. He called her 3 times that night. 3 times. She let every single one ring out. Welcome to K-Afro Diary. This is the story of a Nigerian-Igbo woman who checked her cheating husband into her 5-star hotel, filed for divorce the next morning, and left 4 words where her wedding ring used to be. Like if you are not okay right now and you don't want to be. Subscribe, because women who build things in silence dismantle things in silence too. And this channel will always show you how. Let's go. The lobby of the residence Jeju smelled like white tea and money. It always did. That was not an accident. The scent had been specifically commissioned from a fragrance house in Grasse, France, at a cost that would have made most people blink twice and look away. Everything about the residence had been designed with that kind of intention. The 7-meter ceilings dressed in pale limestone, the furniture that managed to look both minimal and deeply comfortable, the light that fell through the floor-to-ceiling windows in long, unhurried sheets and washed the entire lobby in something close to gold. The hotel sat on the southeastern edge of Jeju Island like something that had always belonged there, though it had only opened 4 years ago. It had earned its 5th star in 14 months. That was a record, and everyone inside the building knew it. Zara Kwon knew it better than anyone. She had been there since the opening. Head Concierge of the residence Jeju. A title that sounded elegant and was, in practice, the operational spine of everything that actually made the hotel function. Not the general manager, whose name appeared on the press releases. Not the director of guest experience, who attended the industry conferences and accepted the awards on behalf of the property. Zara. She was the one guests asked for by name when they came back. She was the one the staff went to when something had gone wrong and needed to be quietly corrected before anyone with a higher title noticed. She was the one who remembered that the CEO of a Seoul tech firm liked his espresso at exactly 6:45 every morning, and that the elderly couple who returned every spring to Suite 304 always needed extra blankets regardless of what the thermostat said. She had built something at this hotel. Carefully over 4 years, the way you build anything that is meant to last, with attention and consistency and the particular patience of someone who understands that reputation is constructed one small correct decision at a time. She wore the uniform well. Deep charcoal jacket, ivory blouse, her natural hair pinned into a low, precise shape that took exactly 11 minutes every morning and which she had perfected over 3 years of early shifts. She moved through the lobby with the kind of quiet authority that did not announce itself. Guests felt it before they could name what they were responding to. She was, by any measure, excellent at what she did. She was also, by a measure, far less visible to the people around her, in the middle of a marriage that had been quietly dissolving for longer than she had allowed herself to admit. His name was Shin Hyunwoo, and in the beginning, he had been the kind of man who made everything feel possible. Shin Hyunwoo had a way of entering a room that made other people adjust their posture. He was not especially tall, not the most physically commanding presence in any gathering, but he had been raised inside a particular kind of Korean wealth, old money that had survived 3 generations and had the patience and the coldness of something that had endured, and it showed in the way he carried himself. Unhurried, certain. The ease of a man who had never once had to wonder whether he belonged somewhere. His family operated at the edges of industries that did not advertise themselves. Real estate, private logistics, certain financial instruments that required introductions rather than applications. His name did not appear in newspaper business supplements. It appeared in the kind of quiet, weighty conversations that happened in private dining rooms after the formal part of the evening was concluded. He was not a gangster in the theatrical sense. He was something more composed and considerably more dangerous, a man whose power was structural, whose influence moved through systems rather than confrontations, and who had learned very early in his life that the most effective kind of control was the kind nobody saw coming. Zara had met him 5 years ago at a hospitality industry gala in Seoul. She had been there representing the residence at its pre-opening stage, building relationships with the kind of guests the hotel intended to pursue. He had been there as someone's guest. She never did establish whose, and had spent the better part of an hour at the edge of the room watching the event with the expression of a man deciding which parts of it were worth his time. She had walked past him to reach the bar and he had said, without looking at her directly, that the event's floral arrangement was catastrophically misjudged for the space. She had stopped, looked at the arrangement, an enormous spray of white lilies that was, now that he mentioned it, completely wrong in scale for the low-ceilinged venue it occupied. "You're right," she had said. "It's eating the room." He had turned to look at her then, and the expression on his face, something between appreciation and surprise, as though he had not expected anyone nearby to simply agree without softening the agreement first, had been the beginning of something she could not have predicted and now, 4 years into their marriage, could not entirely bring herself to regret, even now. They had married quickly by most people's standards. 18 months after the gala, Zara had moved from her apartment in Siagwapo to the house Hyunwoo maintained on the northern side of the island, a low, modern structure surrounded by stone walls and wild grass and a view of the sea that made the early mornings feel like standing inside a painting. For 2 years, the marriage had been something she was proud of. Not effortless. She had never trusted anything effortless, but solid, present. He was private in the way that men of his particular background tended to be private, and she had learned to read the specific dialects of his silences, to know which ones meant he was thinking and which ones meant he was closed. He was not demonstrative in public, but at home, in the particular quiet of their shared life, he had been entirely there. Then he had started not being there. Not dramatically. Not in ways that announced themselves with any obvious urgency. He simply became less available. More often in Seoul, or so he said. Meetings that ran late, dinners that extended into evenings she was not part of, the occasional overnight that arrived with an explanation already smoothed and ready. His phone, which had once sat on the kitchen counter like any ordinary object, was now always in his pocket or face down on whatever surface was nearest. He had developed the specific habit of stepping out of rooms to take calls, which was new. Zara noticed. She was, professionally, a person whose entire skill set was built on noticing. She noticed things guests needed before they articulated them. She noticed when a member of her team was struggling 3 days before they came to her about it. She noticed the specific texture of things that were quietly heading toward wrong. She noticed all of it about her marriage and spent the better part of 6 months constructing elaborate and increasingly unconvincing stories about why each individual thing she had noticed was, in isolation, explainable and fine. She had stopped telling herself those stories about 3 months ago. She hadn't confronted him. Not yet. She had spent those 3 months doing something more methodical. Watching, remembering, building a picture with the same quiet precision she brought to everything else. She did not yet have the details. She did not have a name or a face. But she knew the shape of what was happening, and she had begun, in a practical and forward-looking way, to prepare herself for what came next. She had not expected what came next to walk through her lobby on a Tuesday afternoon in November. The morning of that Tuesday began the way most of Zara's mornings began. Early, organized, and already in motion before the hotel had fully woken up. She was at her concierge desk by 7, working through the day's arrivals list with the focused efficiency of someone who treated every incoming guest as a small logistical project requiring advanced thought. She knew which suites had been assigned to whom, which had special requests attached to the reservation, which were returning visitors with preferences already on file, and which were first-timers who would need the full orientation of the residence's particular world. The hotel had 42 suites. On this Tuesday 38 were occupied. For arrivals expected throughout the day. She ran through them without pausing. Suite 12, the Haenyo Garden Suite, a couple celebrating their anniversary first visit, had requested rose petal turndown and a bottle of the local sparkling wine. Noted. Suite 28, the Seacliff Executive, a solo business traveler returning guest, preferred no welcome amenities, early turndown only, all communications strictly by text. Noted. Suite 7, the Jeju Grand Panorama, a 2-night booking made 3 weeks ago through the hotel's private reservations line, name on the booking listed as Shin. Zara's fingers stopped on the keyboard. She looked at the name for a moment with the particular stillness of a person whose body has understood something a fraction faster than the conscious mind is prepared to process it. Shin. It was a common enough surname. The booking was under Shin Min-jae, not Shin Hyunwoo. A different given name entirely. She stared at it for 3 full seconds. The reservation note said, 2 guests. Dietary preferences submitted. 1 standard, 1 pescatarian. Champagne on arrival. Late checkout requested for Thursday. 2 guests. She sat with this for exactly 3 seconds. Then she continued down the arrivals list with her face entirely composed, finished the morning briefing with her team, and walked through the hotel's opening checks exactly as she always did. She was warm. She was present. She was, to every person she spoke to that morning, entirely and completely herself. Inside, something had settled into a cold and clarifying stillness. The kind that did not feel like panic or grief or even anger. The kind that felt, more than anything, like the moment when a long, complicated equation finally resolves into a single clean answer. She had a suite number. She had a check-in time. The reservation said late afternoon between 4 and 6. She had the particular quality of certainty that comes not from proof, but from the convergence of everything you have quietly known for months. And she had, as she always did when the variables of a complicated situation arranged themselves into known quantities, a plan. Hyunwoo arrived at 4:47. Zara knew he was in the lobby before she saw him because Jisoo, one of her junior concierge staff, came quickly and quietly to the desk and said that a guest had just arrived for Suite 7 and had asked for the head concierge to handle the check-in personally. Zara looked up from the document she was reviewing. Did they ask for me by name? By title, Jisoo said. They want the most senior person. Zara considered this for a moment. That was Hyunwoo's way. Not knowing her schedule, not knowing she was working today. Simply demanding the most senior person available because that was how he moved through every space he occupied. He expected the best of everything as a matter of course, not as a request. She said quietly, "I'll handle it." She walked to the check-in area without hurrying. Hyunwoo was standing near the entrance with his back half-turned to the room, speaking in a low voice into his phone. He was wearing a dark coat she recognized. She had been with him when he bought it, at a boutique in Cheongdam-dong on a Saturday afternoon the previous spring, when things between them had still felt like something that could be repaired. He looked exactly as he always looked. Composed and hurried, belonging entirely to himself. The woman beside him was looking at the lobby with open appreciation. She was Korean, precisely put together in the way of someone who had devoted considerable resources to appearing effortless. A cream-colored coat, her hair immaculate, the bright and unguarded excitement of someone arriving somewhere they had been looking forward to for weeks. She was objectively beautiful. She was also, clearly, entirely comfortable beside him. That particular ease that comes not from a first encounter but from something established and ongoing. Zara assessed all of this in the time it took to cross the lobby. Then she assembled her expression into the warm, composed, professionally welcoming face she wore for every arriving guest without exception. And she said, "Good afternoon. Welcome to the residence. I understand we're expecting you for Suite 7. Hyunwoo turned. The moment he saw her face, everything he was wearing, all of it, the ease, the confidence, the settled certainty of a man who believed he had the variables of his life under adequate management, came off him like a coat in a strong wind. What was underneath was not guilt, precisely. It was the specific blankness of a person whose contingency planning has just been rendered entirely useless. He said her name. Just her name. The way you say a word when you have no sentence prepared to follow it. Zara smiled. It was the smile she gave guests. Exactly that smile. Nothing warmer and nothing colder. She turned her gaze briefly, and with complete professional courtesy, to the woman beside him. "And your guest. Welcome. We're very glad to have you both at the residence." She let a single half-beat of silence pass, barely perceptible, the length of a breath, and then she said in the same pleasant, unhurried voice she used to discuss dinner reservations and spa bookings, "I'll be managing your stay personally." The woman's expression shifted slightly. Something had registered. Not the full picture, she couldn't have the full picture yet, but enough. The particular alertness of a person who has sensed a current in the room without yet identifying its source. She looked at Hyunwoo once, quickly, with a question she didn't ask. Hyunwoo was still looking at Zara. His jaw was set. He was, she knew, constructing something, an explanation, a version of events, some architecture of words that would make this manageable. She had watched him do it before in other situations, in business contexts, in family gatherings where something had gone sideways. He was fast and he was good at it. She did not give him the opening. She turned to her desk and began the check-in process with the efficient, gracious, completely controlled composure that had built the reputation of this hotel one guest at a time. "Allow me to go through a few things for your comfort during your stay," she said. Her hands were steady. Her voice was steady. The lobby continued its quiet, expensive life around them. A couple crossing toward the restaurant, soft piano from the lounge above, the faint suggestion of the sea through the glass at the far end of the room. She confirmed the suite details. She noted their dietary preferences with the attentive interest she gave every guest. She outlined the morning breakfast service, the spa hours, the private beach access schedule, the in-room dining menu. She did all of it with the smooth, practiced warmth of someone who did this every single day and found genuine satisfaction in doing it well. At no point did she look at Hyunwoo the way a wife looks at a husband. She looked at him the way she looked at every guest. Present, professional, warm enough to be welcoming and contained enough to be respected. As she handed over the suite key cards, 2 of them, one for each guest, which she presented in the small branded envelope with the hotel's crest, she said pleasantly, "If there's anything you need at any point during your stay, please don't hesitate to ask for me directly. I'll make sure your time here is everything it should be." The last 4 words landed in a very specific way. She saw him receive them. She saw the woman beside him look at her with the kind of attention that meant something had finally begun to arrange itself into a shape with meaning. Then Zara smiled one final time, warm, professional, entirely composed, and said, "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Shin." She did not say his first name. She had not said his first name once. She had spoken to him the way she spoke to every guest at the residence, with the same warmth and the same precise, contained courtesy, and in doing so had made visible something that all the anger in the world could not have communicated as clearly. He was nobody special here. He was a guest, like any other. She watched them move toward the elevator bank with a member of the bell staff. Hyunwoo walked without his usual ease. The woman beside him had gone quiet in a way that was entirely different from the comfortable quiet of someone who had arrived somewhere lovely. She was thinking. Zara could see it from across the lobby. Then the elevator doors opened and closed and they were gone. Zara stood at her desk for a moment. Around her, the lobby continued. Soft music, low voices, the smell of white tea and money. One of her team members passed with a trolley of amenities. A couple near the entrance laughed about something. The hotel did what it always did, which was to make the world outside its walls feel temporarily irrelevant. She smoothed the front of her jacket, picked up her pen, returned to the document she had been reviewing before Jisoo came to her desk. She had 3 more arrivals to prepare for before her shift ended. By the time evening settled over the residence, Hyunwoo had called her twice. She saw both calls come in while she was completing the evening handover with her team, and she let both of them ring out with the same stillness she had maintained all day. She did not feel the particular pull of those calls the way she might have felt them a year ago, or even 6 months ago. That anxious, involuntary reaching toward whatever he needed. That pull had been dying slowly for a while. Now it was simply gone. She finished her handover. She thanked her evening team. She changed out of her uniform in the staff room and stood for a moment in the quiet of it, the hum of the building around her, the particular hush of a hotel at night when the guests had all settled and the corridors carried that specific held-breath quality of a place full of people at rest. She drove home. The house on the northern side of the island looked exactly as it always looked in the evening. The low stone walls, the light she had left on in the kitchen that morning, the sound of the wind off the water. She had loved this house. She had chosen things in it carefully over time in the way you furnish a place you intend to stay in. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table. And then she did what she had been building toward for 3 quiet months. She opened her laptop, found the name and contact of a lawyer a colleague had recommended to her at the beginning of the year, and sent a brief, clear email explaining that she needed to begin proceedings as quickly as possible and asking when they could speak. She sent it at 9:14 in the evening. She received an automated reply confirming receipt. She closed her laptop. She did not cry. Not because she was not sad. She was, somewhere deep under the cold clarity of the last several hours, genuinely and completely sad for the thing the marriage had been and was not anymore. But the grief was not new. She had been sitting with it in small, private amounts for months, letting it move through her in pieces rather than all at once. There was nothing left that required the release of tonight specifically. What tonight had been was not a wound. It had been a confirmation. She finished her tea. She put the cup in the sink. She went to bed and slept, not perfectly but adequately, in the way of someone who has made a decision and is no longer waiting. In Suite 7, the Jeju Grand Panorama lived up entirely to its name. The room was extraordinary. The ocean visible from 3 separate windows, the infinity bath set into the stone floor of the bathroom, the terrace that ran the full width of the suite and looked out over water that at night held every shade of dark blue the eye could distinguish. The champagne had been delivered as requested. The turndown had been completed. 2 robes hung in the bathroom. Everything was exactly as promised. Neither of them was enjoying any of it. Hyunwoo sat on the terrace with his phone on the table in front of him and a glass of something he had barely touched. He had tried calling Zara twice and gotten no answer, which told him everything he needed to know about how that particular avenue was going to go. He had spent the hour since arriving in the suite in the specific mental state of a man who has been tactically outmaneuvered and is still working out exactly when and how it happened. Park Soo-jin sat in the chair across from him with her coat still on, which was a sign. She had taken the champagne when it arrived and poured a glass with the systematic efficiency of someone who needed it for reasons unrelated to celebration. She had looked at the view. She had looked at the room. She had looked at him. She said, "That was your wife." He did not answer. She said, "The head concierge of this hotel is your wife." He looked at the ocean. "You told me you had a place here," she said. "You said you knew the hotel." He did know the hotel. He simply hadn't known, had never had reason to know, because he had never connected the hotel she worked at to this particular property. That Zara's hotel was this one. Soo-jin stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the water for a long moment. "I want you to understand something," she said. And her voice had changed from the bright, anticipatory warmth it had carried all day into something considerably more measured. What she did down there, the way she checked us in, the way she spoke, the way she handled the whole thing without a single word or expression that anyone else in that lobby would have found unusual, that was not the behavior of a woman who doesn't know what's happening. He said nothing. That was the behavior of a woman who has known for a long time, Soo-jin continued, and who just confirmed it. She's not going to call you and cry, Hyunwoo. She's not going to make a scene. She checked us in and went back to work. He picked up his glass. Put it down again. Soo-jin turned from the window. She looked at him for a long moment with the particular expression of a woman doing a rapid and honest reassessment of a situation she thought she had understood. "I think I'd like to go home," she said. "What? Not tonight. I'm not going to make a whole thing of it tonight. But tomorrow. I think this needs to end differently than it started. I think we both know that." He looked at her. She shook her head slowly, not unkindly. "You've spent however long deciding what kind of woman your wife is. Tonight I saw her for 5 minutes and I can already tell you that you've gotten it wrong. And I don't want to be part of whatever happens next because of that." She took her champagne to the bathroom and closed the door. Hyunwoo sat on the terrace of the most beautiful suite in one of the most beautiful hotels on the island and looked at the ocean for a very long time. The nights in Jeju in November have a particular quality. A coldness that comes off the water and settles into the stone of the island, and a stillness that makes the world feel very precisely the size it actually is, without the comfortable illusions that daylight and activity tend to provide. He sat in that stillness for longer than he usually sat with anything. He tried Zara's number a third time. Rang. Rang. Did not connect. He put the phone face down on the table and sat with the fact that he was in a hotel his wife ran, in a suite she had checked him into, with a woman who was now sleeping on the far side of the bed with her back turned. He sat with the fact that Zara had stood at her desk and processed his arrival without a tremor in her hands or a single deviation from the professional warmth she gave everyone, and that the control that required was not the control of someone suppressing explosion. It was the control of someone who had already moved beyond the moment, who was performing the present tense from a position somewhere further along. He understood sitting there that Soo-jin was right. He had made a series of assumptions about Zara over the course of their marriage, about what she noticed and what she didn't, about what she would accept and what she would pursue, about the architecture of her patience. He had built his entire management of the situation on those assumptions, and every single one of them had been wrong. He went to bed eventually. He did not sleep much. In the morning, Soo-jin arranged a car back to the ferry terminal without asking him. She was composed and not unkind about it. She was not a cruel woman, and this was not, in her reading of it, his fault alone. But she had made a decision in the night, and she was moving with it in the morning the way practical people do. They said goodbye in the lobby. Brief. Civil. Final in the way of things that have run their full course. He stood in the lobby of the residence after her car had gone and looked at the concierge desk. Zara was not there. It was her day off, a member of staff told him when he asked. She wasn't expected in until Thursday. He stood there for a moment longer. The lobby smelled like white tea. Light came through the windows in long, unhurried sheets. The hotel continued its quiet, expensive life around him. He checked out at 11 and drove back to the north of the island. The house looked different when he pulled up to it. He could not immediately identify what had changed. The stone walls were the same, the wild grass was the same, the view of the sea was the same. But something had shifted in the quality of the place. A stillness that was not peace. He went inside. The kitchen was clean. The living room was familiar. The books still on the shelves. The low furniture still arranged the way they had arranged it together in the first year. The photographs still on the mantelpiece. Her coat still on the hook by the door, one of the older ones she sometimes left behind. But on the kitchen table, laid flat and squared neatly as though it had been placed there with some consideration, was an envelope. His name on the front in her handwriting. Clean, precise. The way she wrote everything. He stood at the table for a moment before he sat down and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Printed. Official letterhead. A law firm in Jeju City, with a second address in Seoul. A brief, formal paragraph confirming that legal proceedings for the dissolution of marriage had been initiated. Petitioner: Zara Kwon. Respondent: Shin Hyunwoo. Filed 2 days ago, which meant she had filed it the morning after he had arrived at the hotel, which meant the decision had not been made in the heat of the evening. It had been made in the cold, clear morning after, which was so entirely like her that he sat with it for a long time. Beside the letter, on the bare wood of the table, were 2 things: her wedding ring and a small folded piece of paper. He unfolded it. 4 words. I've already checked out. He sat at the kitchen table for a while. The sea was visible through the window, doing what the sea does. Moving, indifferent, vast, entirely unbothered by the small human dramas unfolding at its edges. He thought about the evening in Seoul 5 years ago, the misjudged floral arrangement, the woman who had simply agreed with him without softening it. He thought about the specific quality of her composure at the check-in desk 2 days ago. Not cold, not brittle, not the performance of someone holding back feeling. Just clear. Already pointed somewhere else. Eugene had told him. She had told him in the suite on the first night, and she had told him again in the morning, and she had been telling him, in various ways, for as long as she had known enough to see it. He had not believed her because he had decided what Zara was and had never gone back to check the decision. He had been wrong about everything that mattered. 4 months later, Hyunwoo was in the back of a car in Seoul on the way to a meeting he hadn't prepared adequately for because he had spent the better part of the drive not looking at his notes but at the large-format hotel industry magazine his assistant had left on the seat, one of those glossy, substantial publications that arrived quarterly and which he usually ignored. He had picked it up because the cover had caught his attention. The residence Jeju had been named the leading luxury boutique property in Korea for the 2nd consecutive year. The feature inside was several pages. Photographs of the suites, the grounds, the restaurant at dusk, the private beach in morning light. And midway through the spread, there was a photograph of the hotel's staff, posed in the lobby with the formal but warm arrangement of people who had achieved something together. Zara was in the center of it. She was in her uniform. The deep charcoal jacket, the precise and elegant posture, the specific quality of composed authority she had always carried. She was not smiling the wide, performed smile of someone making themselves photogenic. She was smiling the way she smiled when something was genuinely good. Contained, real, directed slightly to the left of the camera as though something had just been said that she found satisfying. The caption beneath the photograph listed the team's names. Beside hers, in the magazine's small italic text, a line. Zara Kwon, recently appointed Director of Guest Experience, the residence Jeju, whose tenure has been central to the property's continued recognition. Director of Guest Experience. He looked at it for a long moment. The car moved through Seoul traffic. The city did its ordinary things around him. Noise and motion and the dense, purposeful energy of a place that does not pause for individual circumstances. He turned the page. Then he turned it back. She had not simply survived the thing he had put her through. She had not retreated into the shape he had assigned her, or become defined by what he had done or remained in the space where he had left her. She had moved. Forward and upward. And with the same focused, practical, entirely self-directed energy she had always brought to everything she decided to take seriously. The marriage, the grief, the Tuesday evening in November when she had checked him into a suite in her own hotel and done it with perfect grace. None of it had been the end of her story. It had been a departure point. He closed the magazine. The car continued. Seoul moved around him. He thought about what she had written. 4 words on a folded piece of paper. I've already checked out. She hadn't been talking about the hotel. She had been talking about something she had clearly done long before he had given her the final reason to. Something she had done quietly and with the same methodical care she brought to everything, in the months before that Tuesday, in the small private work of preparing herself to leave well, to leave cleanly, to leave in a direction that was entirely hers. He had walked into her hotel thinking the variables were under his management. She had been the one managing variables. just not the ones he was watching. The car pulled up to the building where his meeting was waiting. He got out. He straightened his coat. He did not look back at the magazine on the seat. But he thought about the photograph for the rest of the day. Her face, the real smile, the posture of someone who knew exactly where she was and found the view entirely worth the journey. He thought about it specifically, every time in the months that followed when he was tempted to believe that the quietest people in a room were the ones with the least to say. They were not. They were almost always the ones who had already said everything that needed saying, in ways that did not require anyone else's attention to count. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to K-Afro Diary and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the most powerful response is sometimes the one that doesn't raise its voice. Some people don't fall apart. They simply finish packing long before you realize they were ever leaving. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.